What leads a family to commit the unthinkable act of abandoning their pet, a loyal member of his clan, in a post and desolate gasoline post? Imagine the scene. A magnificent bull, confused and heartbroken, observes the only world he has known to disappear in a cloud of dust and broken promises. Left behind, he faces an indifferent and hostile world, armed only with the memory of a home that no longer exists. His journey is a survival odyssey, marked by cruelty and unexpected acts of compassion. But what happens below challenges all logic. In a turnaround of fate that no one could predict, this lone bull not only finds a new purpose, but performs such a heroic act that it will change the lives of all around it forever. Get ready for a story that will shake your emotions and redefine what you think about loyalty, courage, and the true meaning of family. What he did next will not just surprise him, will restore your faith in the power of connection. The afternoon sun launched a merciless shine over the gas station spent, an oasis forgotten in the middle of a road that stretched like a gray and endless tape. The heat rippled in the air, distorting the image of the old cattle truck parked next to the diesel pump, its engine coughing a dark, tired smoke. Within the tight cabin, the silence was heavier than the humidity of the air, a blanket of unwitworldly words and bitter decisions that hovered over the three occupants. The father, a man with fallen shoulders and a lost look on the horizon, held the steering wheel with the white fingers' joints, the expression hardened by a pain he refused to name. Beside her, her mother wiped a lone tear that insisted on escaping, the scarf of cheap fabric kneaded in her trembling hands. In the back seat, the young son stared at the window, his eyes reflecting the arid landscape and the emptiness that was beginning to form on his chest, an early understanding of the cruelty that adults were able to inflict in the name of necessity. In the truck's body, under the same sun, was the reason for that painful stop. A magnificent bull, dark and glossy coat, with muscles that ripped with each contained movement. His name was Brave, a name that wrapped ironically with the fate that had been drawn to him without his knowledge. He remained standing, imposing, but his great dark eyes, ordered by long eyelashes, did not show the ferocity of his species, but a calm and confidence that blindly placed in the family who had created him since he was just a clumsy calf. He smelled the familiar smell of dust, the sweat of the man who feeded him, and the woman's smooth floral perfume that sometimes scratched her behind her ears. The balance of the truck had stopped, and he waited patiently, as he always did, for the next step of the journey, without imagining that this would be the last time they smelled, the last time it would be wrapped in the aura of belonging that had defined their entire existence until that moment. The father finally broke the silence, his voice hoarse and low, as if the words scratched his throat. "It's here," he said, without facing his wife or son. "You can't do it anymore. You know you can't." The woman only nodded, her face sinkled in the handkerchief, the cry now a silent and convulsed sob. The boy did not move, said nothing, but a new tear ran down his dirty face of dust, drawing a clean path on his skin. He knew what those words meant. He knew that the merciless drought had taken the pasture, the money, and now he would take Brave. The decision, although understood in his cold and desperate logic, tore his childish heart with the brutality of a betrayal. He loved that bull, who had been his joke companion, his silent confidant in the fields that were now dead and sterile. Leaving Brave there was like leaving a piece of his own soul behind, abandoned by the roadside. The man descended from the truck, the slow, heavy movements, like those of a prisoner walking to the gallows. He walked to the rear of the vehicle, his heart hammering the ribs. Each step was torture. He avoided looking into Valente's eyes, focusing his attention on the ramp mechanism. The metal ranged in protest when he downloaded, a sharp sound that cut the heavy air of the afternoon, a foreshadowing of the braking that was coming. Brave, feeling the slope of the ramp, he stepped ahead, curious, waiting for the command to go down, perhaps to drink water or stretch his legs. He trusted. Confidence was the essence of its relationship with that family. He did not know the fear coming from them, just care, the touch, the voice that called him by name. He did not know the fear coming from them, just care, the touch, the voice that called him by name. He had no reason to doubt, to fear what was to come, and this innocence made the imminent act even more cruel. With the ramp on the floor, the man finally looked up. For a moment, his eyes found those of Valente's. In those dark and deep orbs, he did not see an animal, but a mirror of his own failure. He saw the loyalty that was about to crush, the life that was about to discard. A wave of shame and pain hit him with physical strength, making him divert his face. With a quick and sudden gesture, he untied the rope that held the bull. "Go," he murmured, the almost inaudible voice, a breath of wind in the suffocating heat. "Go, brave." The bull hesitated, confused by the strange tone, the lack of family touch. He took a hesitant step out of the body, his paws touching the dusty floor of the gas station. He turned, hoping that the family would follow him, to continue, not understanding that for them, the journey together had just finished. The man didn't wait. He closed the ramp with a metallic crash that sounded like a shot in the afternoon silence. He ran to the cabin, his face an agony mask, and started the engine. The truck protested, choked, and finally caught, the sound of the engine covering the low and confused lament that Valente released. The vehicle began to move slowly at first, and then gaining speed, raising a cloud of red dust that involved the lone bull. The boy, in the back seat, pressed his face against the glass, his hands spread, the fixed eyes in the figure of his friend who diminished quickly, becoming a dark point in the vastness of the road. He wanted to scream, wanted to stop the truck, wanted to run back. But the weight of his father's decision paralyzed him, held him in his seat, a powerless viewer of that silent and brutal farewell. Valente stood, the dust based on him, the smell of diesel and exhaustion filling his nostrils. He watched the truck move away, a smaller and smaller spot on the shimmering horizon. He didn't understand. In your mind, they always came back. They went to the city market, to the house of other farmers, but always, invariably, they came back to him. Loyalty was a simple concept in his world, a one-way road he followed without question. He would wait. He would stay there in the heat and dust and wait. Because that's what the family did. They took care of each other. They came back. He did not know that the sound of that engine walking away was the sound of his heart starting to break, a slow and painful fracture that would echo in the emptiness they left behind. The sun began to descend, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, colors of a bruise. The gas station, once just a stopping point, became an island of solitude. Cars and trucks passed, some slowing out of curiosity, drivers throwing confused glances at the unlikely figure of a bull standing next to the fuel pumps. No one stopped. For them, it was just a strange view, an anomaly in the road monotony. For Valente, it was the beginning of a vigil, waiting for a promise that was never made, but he believed with all the strength of his being. He remained there, a statue of confusion and fidelity, the last trace of a family undone by dust and despair, a silent witness of a goodbye that would forever echo in the memory of that forgotten road. The night fell, bringing with it a cold that was not just the temperature. The lights of the gas station came on, throwing long and dancing shadows that transformed the family world into a strange and threatening place. Brave was still there. The smell of his family had already been taken by the wind, replaced by the cold odor of asphalt and loneliness. The sound of the truck engine was now just a distant memory, a ghost vibration in your ears. Hope, once a firm flame on his chest, was beginning to falter, to become a weak and trembling ember. He was alone. For the first time in his life, he was complete and terribly alone, abandoned not only in a gas station, but in a world that had suddenly become incomprehensible and hostile, a place where loyalty was paid with silence and disappearance. The hours dragged on the slow wound that refuses to heal. Valente remained motionless, his dark silhouette cut out against the fluorescent lights and buzzing of the post. Each approaching car brought a twinge of hope, a startle on his chest. He raised his head, his ears alert, sniffing the air in search of that familiar smell, listening carefully to the engine snoring, trying to recognize the sound that had taken him away from home. But each vehicle was a disappointment. Fast sedans, noisy trucks, motorcycles that passed as metallic insects. None of them were your truck. None of them brought back the boy's face, the woman's hand, the man's voice. Hope, once a lighthouse, turned into an anxiety needle, choking his heart with each disappointment, with each lighthouse that blinded him and walked ahead, leaving him again in darkness and uncertainty. The world around it was a kaleidoscope of strange and uncomfortable sensations. The smell of gasoline was strong, irritating his sensitive nostrils, so different from the sweet aroma of the hay and damp earth of his pasture. The constant tinnitus of the convenience store's lights and refrigerators was an annoying soundtrack, a noise that did not bring him peace, unlike the cricket corner and the wind of the wind in the trees. The people who stopped to fuel looked at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Some pointed out, took pictures with their cell phones, laughed. Others kept distance, their eyes wide, as if it were an appearance, a monster out of place. No one was approaching with a cuddle, with a kind word. He was an object, a curiosity, not a living being with a heart that hit a rhythm of pure anguish. The confusion was a dense fog in his mind. 'Twas passed on the last moments in his animal memory. The trip, the stop, the ramp down, the man's hand untie the rope, the word, go. What did you mean? In his experience, go was followed by an open field, a fresh stream, a new pasture to explore. He had never been followed by a metallic crash, by the vision of his whole world moving away in a cloud of dust. He could not process the logic of that abandonment. There was no reason. He had been a good bull, obedient, strong. He had never caused problems. Why would they leave him there? The question spinned in his head, unanswered, a carousel of misunderstanding that made him dizzy and nauseated. Betrayal was too complex a concept, but the feeling of being left behind, it understood at a visceral, primitive level. The headquarters began to squeeze. His lips were dry, his throat scratched. He looked around, looking for a trough, a bucket, any sign of water. He saw the puddles of iridescent oil on the floor, smelled antifreeze in the air, but nothing that could quench the thirst that grew inside it. At home, the water was a certainty. There was the large metal tank, always full, and the creek that serpented through the pasture. Water was life. It was careful. Her absence there, in that strange place, was another sign that something was terribly wrong. Negligence was as painful as an abandonment as the departure of the truck. It was the denial of his most basic needs, a silent testimony that he no longer mattered, that his survival had been left at random, at the mercy of a hostile and indifferent environment. Over the night, the energy of hope gave way to deep tiredness, an exhaustion that was not just physical, but emotional. Valente finally lay down, the heavy body yielding to gravity. He chose a piece of thin and dirty ground near the edge of the asphalt, as far as he could from lights and noise. But the floor was hard and cold, and sleep was not coming. His eyes remained open, fixed on the dark road, still looking for, still waiting, even if a part of him already knew that the wait was in vain. Every shadow that moved, every distant sound, was a ghost of his family. He could almost feel the touch of the boy's hand on his hair, hear the woman's laughter, see the figure of the man approaching with a hay burden. It was memories that now haunted him, sweet and cruel, memories of a lost paradise. It was then that full understanding hit him, not as lightning, but as a slow and cold tide that climbed and involved him. They wouldn't go back. The word go was not an invitation, it was a final order, an expulsion. He had been discarded, like a broken object, as something worthless. The perception was a physical pain, a sharp twinge in his chest that made him drop a low mute and lament. A sound that was the pure expression of pain and loss. It was the sound of a heart departing. The loyalty he had offered so freely thrown away. The love he felt, a pure and unconditional feeling, had been betrayed. At that moment, under the impersonal lights of a gas station, Valente was no longer the family bull. He was nobody's bull, a tribeless being, a homeless, a nuoago on an asphalt island. The boy's silent crying in the truck found an echo in the solitary lament of the bull. They were two halves of the same broken heart, separated by the distance and the decision of an adult. The boy, powerless in his pain, and the bull confused in his loneliness. Both victims of the circumstances, both paying the price of a drought that drives not only the earth, but also compassion. Valente could not know the farmer's struggle, the lack of rain, the hunger that threatened the family. He only knew the result. He only felt the open wound of abandonment, a wound that was invisibly bleeding in the darkness, staining the cold floor of the gas station with the color of his sadness and misunderstanding. The night deepened, and with it, the abyss in his heart. Aurora's first lights found Brave in the same place, but something had changed in their eyes. The confusion had given way to a dark resignation, a deep and quiet sadness. The flame of hope had erased, leaving behind only the cold ashes of reality. He no longer sought the truck on the road. He no longer expected for the familiar smell in the wind. He had accepted his destiny, the harsh truth of his loneliness. The broken heart still hurt, a constant and deaf pain, but now there was a layer of protection forming around it. A disappointment bark. The world was not the safe and loving place he knew. It was a place of inexplicable farewells and broken promises, and he would have to learn to sail him alone. The sun was born, bringing a new day, but to Valente, it was only the continuation of the same long night of his soul. He got up, the rigid and painful muscles. The thirst was now torture. Hunger was beginning to make herself feel, an emptiness in her stomach that echoed the emptiness in her chest. He looked at the road, not with hope, but with a new purpose starting to form in his cloudy mind. If his family wouldn't go back to him, maybe he could go to them. Or maybe he just needed to move, go anywhere, away from that place of betrayal. The look of confusion had become a look of nascent determination, the first spark of a journey he never asked for, but now was his only option. The broken heart was still there, but now it beat a new pace, the rhythm of survival. The day advanced, and the gas station returned to its frantic routine. Cars came and were going. People came in and out of the convenience store, most ignoring the large, immovable figure near the grass. But not all were indifferent. From the small payment booth, a pair of kind eyes watched the scene with growing concern. It was the eyes of John, a 70-year-old man whose wrinkled skin was a map of a working life under the sun. He was the night-and-day-based attendant, a presence as constant as the fuel pumps. He becomes the truck to arrive the previous afternoon. He becomes the man to go down the bowl, and turns the truck leaving the animal behind. At first, he thought that the farmer would come back. It was just a temporary arrangement. But the night had passed, and the bull was still there, a monument to neglect. John felt a twinge of anger and sadness. He had grown in the field, understood the difficulties, the drought, the despair. But abandoning an animal like that, a being who was clearly domesticated and entrusted to humans, was something his moral code could not accept. He observed the bull, who now moved restless, his tongue passing through the dry lips. The animal's thirst was palpable, a silent agony that echoed in John's heart. He could no longer stand still and just watch. During a pause in the movement, he took a large bucket, which he used to clean the windshield, rinsed it vigorously, and filled it with fresh water from the back tap. Cold water overflowed, wetting his calloused hands, and he felt he was holding a little life, a little hope. With the heavy bucket in hand, John walked slowly towards Valente. He moved calmly, without sudden gestures, his voice low and soft. "Calm down, Big, calm down," he murmured. "I won't hurt you. I just brought you some water." Brave, seeing the man approaching, was tense. His recent experience with humans. He cringed, ready to escape, his taut muscles. His instincts told him to suspect, not to allow anyone to approach. The wound of betrayal was very fresh, and the pain had made him rude and fearful. He saw the man, the bucket, and associated him with the world that had rejected him. A low warning growled on his chest, a sound he rarely used. John stopped at a safe distance, realizing the fear of the animal. He did not force the approach. Instead, he placed the bucket on the floor, several meters away from Valente, and took a few steps back, showing that he did not represent a threat. "It's okay," he said, the voice still calm and reassuring. "It's for you. You can drink." He stood, his hands open by his body, in a gesture of non-aggression. He waited with the patience that life had taught him. He understood the language of fear, the hesitation born of pain. He gave the bull the space and the time he needed to process the situation, to understand that that hand, though strange, was not coming to injure, but to help. Time seemed to stop, the only sound being the tinnet of the distant traffic and the heavy breath of Valente. The smell of fresh water reached the nostrils of Valente. It was an irresistible aroma, a promise of relief to his burning throat. The headquarters fought against fear in an internal battle. He looked at the bucket, then to the man. John's eyes did not contain the hardness or pain he turns into the eyes of his former owner. There was something different there, compassion, a kindness quietly. Slowly, very slowly, Valente took a step forward, then another. His body was still tense, but the primary need for water was overcoming distrust. He approached the bucket with caution, stretching his neck, ready to retreat at the slightest sign of danger. When his muzzle finally touched the surface of the water, he drank and drank. He drank long and deeply, the sound of his suction filling the air. Cold water was a balm, not just for your body, but to your soul. It was the first act of kindness he received since his world had crumbled. As he drank, he kept an eye on the old attendant, but John did not move. He just watched, a small smile forming on his wrinkled lips. In that simple gesture, a man offering water to a thirsty animal, a bridge was built on the abyss of distrust. Brave began to understand that not all humans were like those who had left him. There was kindness in the world, even in the most unexpected places. Water was not just water. It was a message. It was net hope. When he finished drinking, Brave raised his head, drops of water dripping from his muzzle. He looked at John, and for the first time there was no fear in his eyes, but an expression of gratitude, a silent recognition. He let out a soft sigh, a sound that was not pain, but of relief. John, feeling the change in the attitude of the animal, dared to take a step ahead. "See, just boy," he said, "the world is not that bad." He stretched his hand slowly, not to play, but as an invitation. Valente did not go back. He remained standing, watching his hand-wrinkled and stained hand, a hand that had offered his life. He did not allow himself to be touched yet. The memory of betrayal was a barrier, but it allowed proximity, and that was a beginning. That day, an unlikely routine began to graduate. John brought water to Valente at regular intervals. He later appeared with a handful of hay he had achieved with a friend from a neighboring farm. He did not try to arrest Brave, did not try to force a friendship. He simply offered care, without asking for anything in return. He spoke to his bull, told him stories of his life, about the passing cars, about time. Valente heard, man's calm presence becoming a point of stability in his chaotic world. John's friend did not heal Valente's broken heart, but cleaned the wound, applied a bandage of compassion, and gave him a reason not to give up. The hope, which had died the night before, began to sprout again, a small, fragile plant growing in the arid soil of its despair. It was no longer the hope that your family would come back. It was a different, more subtle hope. The hope that goodness existed. The hope that he could survive. The silent friendship between the old attendant and the abandoned bull became a common view at the gas station. Drivers who passed frequently began to notice the scene, no longer afraid, but with a silent admiration. It was a living reminder that, even in the midst of the rush and indifference of the modern world, compassion could still flourish in the most arid places, offered by a friendly hand that saw not only a lost animal, but a needy soul. Despite John's kindness, Valente could not stay at the gas station forever. The place was dangerous, with cars and trucks passing at high speed a few meters away. Moreover, a restlessness grew inside him, an ancestral instinct that compelled him to move, looking for a safe place, a green pasture, a home. The gratitude he felt for the old attendant was immense, but his family's memory, no matter how painful, still pulled him. A stubborn and irrational part of it still believed that if you were enough, you could find them. Or maybe he just needed to move away from the place of his greatest pain, leave behind the ghost of the departing truck and the cloud of dust of betrayal. Thus, in an envoy morning, before the sun was born completely, Brave made a decision. With one last look at the sleeping post office, where his only friend slept in his small cabin, Valente turned and began to walk. He did not follow the asphalt road, but plunged into the low vegetation that bordered it. His instincts guided him away from the danger of traffic to the dirt paths and the trails of animals that served by the landscape. The journey was difficult. The terrain was irregular and covered with stones and thorns that hurt their paws, not used to such roughness. The sun, when born, was relentless, and the shadow was scarce. Hunger and thirst were constant companions, a deaf pain that reminded him of his vulnerability. He was alone, sailing for a world for which he was not prepared. He learned quickly. His senses, once drooly by the safe routine of the farm, sharpened. He learned to find hidden rainwater puddles in rocky depressions, to identify edible plants among poisonous, to sniff the danger in the wind. He found other animals, some indifferent, some hostile. Wild dog packs circled him one night, his eyes shining in the darkness, but his grandeur and a deep bunch kept them at a distance. He saw snakes sliding down the dry grass and birds of prey circulating in the sky. Each day was a survival class, proof of his resilience. The pain of his broken heart was temporarily overshadowed by the immediate need to stay alive, to take the next step, to find the next meal. There were moments of unexpected beauty on his journey. He witnessed the sunrise by painting the sky with colors he never saw from the confidence of his pasture. He crossed streams of crystal-clear waters that bubbled over plain stones, the sound a song for his tired ears. He slept under a cloak of stars so bright and close that it seemed to be able to touch them with his horns. In these hours of silence and loneliness, he was no longer the abandoned bull, but part of the wild nature, a free creature moving in harmony with the earth. These moments gave him strength, reminding him that the world was much greater than the pain he carried, that there was life and beauty beyond the memory of his loss. He also found humans. Most of the time, they shook him, fearful of his appearance. Farmers shouted and shot stones to protect their plantations. Drivers honked if he approached the road too much. Each hostile encounter reopened the wound of distrust, reminding him of the cruelty that the human species was capable. But, like John, there were flashes of kindness. Once, an elderly woman who lived in an isolated house saw him drinking from her lake and, instead of chasing him, left a bucket of apples near the fence. She did not approach, but watched from her window with a smile, a silent gesture of compassion that nourished her body and soul. These little acts of kindness were headlights on his journey, reaffirming the lesson he had learned at the gas station. Kindness and cruelty coexisted in the hearts of men. His journey did not have a clear destination. He was guided by a mixture of instinct, memory, and hope. Sometimes the smell of cattle in the wind made him go in one direction, hoping to find others of his kind, to find a new herd. Other times, a memory of the boy's face made him turn in another direction, in a futile search for a past that could not be recovered. He was a pilgrim without map, a wanderer in an imposed odyssey. The journey was transforming him. He was thinner, the scratched coat covered with dust, but his eyes contained a new wisdom, a depth forged in difficulty and solitude. He was no longer the domesticated and naive animal that had been left behind. It was a survivor. One afternoon, exhausted and thirsty, he was attracted to the sound of children's laughs and the smell of water. He followed the sounds with caution, peering through a dense grove. The scene that saw it made him stop, his heart hitting hard. In a clearing near a river, a small family made a picnic. a man, a woman, and a small girl. For a moment, the image overlapped his memory. The resemblance to his own family was painful. The girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, walked away from her parents, running after a colorful butterfly. She laughed, a crystalline sound that echoed in the forest. Valente noted, hidden, a mixture of yearning and sadness invading him. The butterfly flew closer to the bush, and the girl followed her, her little feet taking her further and farther from her parents' safety. She was now a few meters from where Valente hid. Suddenly, the girl stumbled into an exposed root and fell, letting out a scream of pain and surprise. Their parents, distracted for a moment, did not hear. But Brave heard. He saw the girl on the floor, crying, the grated knee bleeding. And then he saw something else. Leaving the dense vegetation, attracted to the smell of blood, a large poisonous snake began to slide toward the immovable child. Valente's protective instinct, the same instinct that linked him to the boy of his former farm, exploded inside him. Without hesitation, he erupted the tree coverage. With a powerful bustling that made the floor shake, he did not attack the snake, but posted between her and the girl, using her massive body like a shield. He hit his paws on the ground tightly, lifting soil and leaves, his imposing and threatening presence making the snake stop, lift his head, and finally retreat, disappearing back in the darkness of the forest. The girl, frightened by the sudden appearance of the giant bull, stopped crying and stared at him with wide eyes. The parents, alerted by the bram, ran toward the scene, the panic stamped on their faces. They saw their daughter on the floor and the huge bull hanging over her. But what they saw then left them speechless. Brave, his complete heroic act, simply turned and began to move slowly, his unexpected journey having taken a course that no one, not even him, could have predicted. The girl's father, a veterinarian named Dr. Arnaldo, was paralyzed for a moment, the brain trying to soothe the impossible scene before him. He expected to find his daughter in danger, threatened by the colossal animal. Instead, he saw the bull moving away with a calm that denied his size, leaving his daughter scared but unharmed. His wife ran to the girl, hugging her and checking if she was fine. Arnaldo, however, his sharp professional instincts, looked to the floor and saw the winding trail of the snake on dust going away. The truth hit him with the force of lightning. The bull was not a threat. He had been a protector. He had saved his daughter's life. "Wait!" he shouted, without thinking, his voice echoing in the clearing. Brave stopped. He turned slowly, his tired eyes fixed on the approaching man. He expected shouts, stones, the usual hostility. Instead, he saw in the man's face an expression of astonishment and gratitude. Arnaldo approached with caution, speaking in a low and soothing tone, very similar to John's, the attendant. "Thank you," said Arnaldo, the words sounding inappropriate to the size of his debt. "You saved my daughter. I don't know how, but you saved her." He looked more closely at Valente and noticed the signs of his long journey. The thinness under the once glossy coat, the scratches, the cuts on the paws, and the deep and old sadness in his eyes. This was not a wild animal. This was an animal that had suffered. The woman and the girl approached, the child now hiding behind her mother's leg, but pending curiosity to her giant savior. "Dad, the big ox scared the bad snake," she said with the innocent simplicity of a child. Arnaldo knelt and hugged his daughter tightly, the heart still hammering with the "and if." He knew he owed everything to that lone bull. He could not simply let him leave, back to a life of difficulties and dangers. "We can't leave it that way," he told his wife, who nodded, his eyes full of tears of relief and admiration for the animal. "He needs help. He needs a safe place." At that moment, Valente's fate changed course once again, not for an act of cruelty, but for one of deep gratitude. Brave with them was not a simple task. Arnaldo used his experience as a veterinarian to gain bull confidence. He spoke softly, offered the picnic food, which Valente has eagerly devoured. Slowly he managed to pass a soft rope around Valente's neck, not to subdue him, but to guide him. The journey back to the car was slow, Brave following the man with a hesitation that soon became a new form of confidence. It was as if he felt that this meeting had not been a chance, but the end of his long and lonely pilgrimage. He was tired, his body and his spirit exhausted by the trial. He was ready to rest, ready to accept the help offered to him. Arnaldo lived in a small farm that also worked as a sanctuary for rescued animals. He had an animal transport trailer and with patience and kindness managed to convince Valente to enter. For Valente, entering a trailer again was an act of immense faith. The memory of the last transport was still alive, associated with abandonment and pain. But Arnaldo's kind touch, the woman's soft voice, and the girl's admiration look were different. There was a silent promise there, not of betrayal, but security. He entered, and when the ramp closed, his heart did not squeeze with fear, but calmed down with a sense of relief, the feeling of finally going home, though for a house he had never known. The arrival at the sanctuary was like entering a paradise. There were green and extensive pastures, much more exuberant than the dry fields of their memory. There were other animals, horses that had been mistreated, sheep that had been abandoned, dogs that had no home. Everyone lived in peace, care by Arnaldo and his family. When the trailer ramp came down, Valente hesitated for a moment, the memory of the gas station flashing in his mind. But then he felt the little girl's hand on her muzzle, a soft, fearless touch. "You're home now, brave ox," she said, and brave I knew it was true. He descended his ramp and stepped in the soft grass, the smell of life and hope filling his lungs. That reunion, born of an almost disaster, was the most shocking and unexpected turnaround of his life. He did not find his old family. He did not return to the past. Instead, his act of bravery and loyalty to a stranger led him to a future he could never have imagined. He found a new family, one that did not see him as a burden to be discarded when the times were difficult, but as a hero to be celebrated, a member to be welcomed. He found a home where his body and soul wounds could finally begin to heal, surrounded by other beings who, like him, knew the pain of loss, but also the joy of redemption. The days that followed were peace and healing. Arnaldo took care of his injuries, his wife fed him with the best hay, and the girl, whose name was Leah, became her constant companion. She wasn't afraid of him. She sat beside her on the grass, reading storybooks aloud, her words blending with the sound of the wind in the trees. She brought her apples and adorned him with field flowers. For her, he was not just a bull. He was his guardian angel, his giant and kind friend. Brave, in turn, found in Leah an echo of the boy he had lost, but without the shadow of the match. He protected her with a silent devotion, her large body a comforting presence next to her small figure. The reunion that no one could predict was not with the past, but with his own happiness. It was the discovery that ties can be forged not by blood or time, but for a single moment of connection, an act of courage and compassion. Brave, the abandoned bull at a gas station, the solitary pilgrim on a journey of despair, had found his place in the world. He was no longer the bull of anyone. He was Leah's bull. He was a hero. He was at home. And in his new home, the sound that filled the air was not that of traffic or silence of loneliness, but the laughter of a child and the constant and healed beat of his own loyal heart. The story of Valente has become a silent legend in Arnaldo's small sanctuary. Each animal there had a history of abandonment or abuse, but Valente's journey was a particularly powerful testimony of the resilience of the spirit and the arbitrary nature of destiny. He was living proof that the end of a chapter, however painful, may be the prelude to a much more beautiful story. His presence in the green pasture, often with the little Leah leaning against his flank, was a living picture that brutally contrasted the cruelty of his first family with the kindness of the second. It was a daily lesson about what it really means to belong, about the ties that truly matter. Valente's first family abandoned him for despair. In his cold logic, he was a resource they could no longer maintain, an extra mouth to feed in times of scarcity. They discarded him at a gas station, an act that, although born of the difficulty, was a deep betrayal of loyalty that the animal had given them unconditionally throughout their lives. They broke a sacred pact, not written on paper, but in daily care, in mutual trust built over the years. Their family was defined by blood ties and convenience, and when the convenience is over, the brave loop fell apart, left behind in the dust of the road as unwanted garbage. On the other hand, Valente's new family was forged in a time of crisis and gratitude. Arnaldo, his wife, and Leah had no obligation to him. He was a stranger, a potentially dangerous animal that crossed his way by chance. However, they saw beyond his appearance. They saw their act of protection, their silent nobility, their vulnerability. They welcomed him not for convenience, but for compassion. They brought him to his home and his hearts, offering him security, care, and, above all, love. Their family was defined not by the blood, but by empathy, the conscious choice of taking care of a needy being, of recognizing its inherent value. Brave, on his journey, taught a deep lesson on loyalty. Even after being betrayed in the cruel way, his fundamental instinct was not of bitterness or revenge, but of protection. When he saw little Leah in danger, he didn't hesitate. Its loyalty was not conditional, it was a part of its essence. He protected the human child with the same ferocity as he would have protected the boy from his former farm. He demonstrated that true loyalty does not forget, does not go out with pain. She remains, waiting for a worthy container. And in Arnaldo and his family, he finally found people whose ability to love corresponded to his ability to be loyal. The true meaning of family, as the history of Valente illustrates, transcends conventional definitions. It's not just about sharing a surname or a ceiling. It's about sharing a heart. It is about being present in times of need, about offering a safe haven in the storm. It is about John's friend, the attendant, who offered water when the world offered indifference. It is about the gratitude of Arnaldo, who saw a hero where others saw a threat. It is about Leah's innocent love, who saw a friend where others saw only one animal. Family is the web of compassion we weave around those we choose to love and protect. Over time, Valente became the quieter patriarch of the sanctuary. His calm and strength seemed to reassure the other rescued animals. He spent his days grazing under the sun, the always abundant grass, the always fresh water. He had not forgotten his past. The scars on his skin and soul were a permanent reminder of his journey. But the pain no longer defined it. The memory of abandonment was overshadowed by the daily reality of love and acceptance. He had learned that the heart, even when broken in 1,000 pieces, has a miraculous ability to regenerate, to love again, to trust again. Sometimes, when the wind blown from a certain direction, he stopped chewing and raised his head, his gaze lost on the horizon. Perhaps he would remember the smell of dust and the sight of the truck disappearing. Maybe he was remembering the boy's tearful face. But then he would feel a small touch on his leg and look down to see Leah, with a dandelion in his hand, smiling at him. And Brave would lower his head, brushing his massive muzzle on the girl's cheek on a gesture of pure affection. The pain of the past was just a distant echo, drowned out of the symphony of his new life. The old family never knew what happened to the bull that left behind. For them, he was a painful memory, a symbol of his failure and a choice of which they might regret silent nights. They never knew of their journey, their heroism, their redemption. They never knew that the animal they discarded found a much larger destination than any pasture they could have offered. They lost a chance to witness the true measure of his nobility and to learn the lesson he had to teach. And so Valente's life continued, a peaceful cycle of sunny days and starring nights. He was a symbol of hope for all who knew his history, a reminder that even in the depths of despair, an act of kindness can change everything. He was proof that the family is not something that is lost, but something that is found, sometimes in the most unexpected places, and that loyalty, when offered to a grateful heart, is the most powerful and healing force of the universe. He was Brave, the bull with a broken heart that taught the world the true meaning of home.